Welcome, guys, to another episode here at Sacred Seed. In today's video, I have the pleasure to have Pedro Carrillo. Pedro lives here in Vilcabamba. He's a good friend. I've known Pedro for some years now. Pedro has been trained in Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, Reiki, yoga, pranayamas, and many other things. So, welcome, Pedro.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you for having me here with you.
Let's start from the beginning. I know that since you were a teenager, right, you've been a seeker, right? What was the first moment that you had some type of clarity around the path that you were gonna take in your life?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know really if I've ever really had clarity in the path that I'm choosing. Um, well, when I was a teenager, like you're saying, I was very interested in philosophy and in self-knowledge. And I started actually experimenting with psychedelics
Mm-hmm.
to kind of find who I am and these kind of questions that we can get trapped in. I was very mental. And then as I had mentioned to you before, I found the Bhagavad Gita. And this was very random. It was a big library back then in the...
For those who don't know what the Bhagavad Gita is, tell us a little
Okay,
bit.
that's beautiful. So the Bhagavad Gita is a small book. It's not very wide. It's a small book that's inside another book. And this is a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna.
Arjuna.
And this conversation, basically, Krishna is our higher consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and Arjuna somehow is also a part of who we are. We could relate that to the mind or the body
Or the ego.
or the ego. Okay. And it's more of how this inner consciousness is trying to guide Arjuna into finding his dharma or his path
Mm-hmm.
in life. And it's surprising. Like, I just remember, still I have this memory of me being in front of this big bookshelf with hundreds or thousands of books, and just being drawn to this little book.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, I remember just taking it and like recognizing it, recognizing the name somehow, even though I had no idea what this was about. And from that moment, I believe right now that probably the Bhagavad Gita is the book that I've read the most.
The most, okay.
There's many versions because there's many translations, different interpretations of it. Some are very religious. This is a book that the Hare Krishnas use. It's a Vaishnava philosophy, the main book of this kind of religion and philosophy. But then there's also other translations that are not really religious based, but more philosophical.
Right.
And there's versions that I really like. There's versions that I don't like that much. And because it's so easy to even change the meaning of one sentence because the translation
Completely
just
different, yeah.
using there's so much where we can see how when people talk about these philosophies, people talk a lot about attachment, for example. But sometimes a word can be translated as attachment, and another time they translate it as fear.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can see like, oh, these are different
Changes the
things, you know,
context
it
completely.
changes it completely.
So I know that it's a profound book. If there's one thing that it's the most important for you, and coming back to the journey, like how it awakened something in you, like what would that be?
How this specific book awakens something in me. I just feel that it gets me into this rabbit hole of trying to understand more what it means. Because every time, even today, like if I read the Bhagavad Gita today, I'm gonna see something that I've never seen. Even if it's a short text, my mind has changed. My way of relating to things have changed. And I would just suddenly read something that I've read thousands of times and then be like, oh, well, I had never seen it this way.
Right.
And that's also part of how different translators would interpret things differently. And even myself, it's like suddenly it's like I have some insight and it's like, oh, wow, I've never thought of this way.
Yeah.
So I feel that it's a never-ending learning process of understanding myself.
Okay.
So a lot of times we can think of these books as having some philosophy that's more of the universe or something external, but I feel that it's just talking about me
Sure.
and
Yeah.
about anybody that's reading it.
Right.
But that way, it's
Relate
just
to that.
giving me some information that I can put into an experience, especially through practices like deep meditation.
Speaking of deep meditation, I know that also Vipassana became a really important thing for you, especially in the early years.
Well, so I would say I discovered the Bhagavad Gita when I was about 17 years old. And then I discovered Vipassana. That was also something that was very interesting because back then internet was very new. It was when we would just research the library and really like getting into the, okay, I'm gonna find this information, and it was such a different experience.
Yeah.
So my first Vipassana retreat or training course, whatever you want to call it, was in 2003. And also very similar to the Bhagavad Gita. I remember I was walking on the streets in Cusco and I saw this poster where it was like Vipassana retreats. And I just also recognized the word. I was like, I've seen this. I know that this is something I want to try, because until then, back then I was like 25 years old. And I had practiced different types of meditation. And always, like, of course, there's so many meditations or ways of what they sell meditation as. And I felt that something was lacking. And somehow I saw this poster and I'm like, I know this is something I really need to try. Like, I've heard of this somehow, but I hadn't.
Yeah.
I had no information what it was. And I remember just being like, I'm doing this, I'm going on this retreat. And normally when you go to a Vipassana, first you get to see a video, and somehow I skipped that. I didn't meant to skip that.
Yeah.
But I went for the information, and then I was in Cusco, but I lived in Lima, and I was returning to Lima, and they were having this back-to-back retreats. And so I said, like, oh, I'm going to take it in Lima. And the lady was like, okay, well, do you watch the video there? But then it never happened.
Never.
So I didn't know it was a silent retreat either. I didn't know what I was signing up for. I was just like, I'm going there and I'm just going to do this.
For those who don't know about this, like, what do you do there?
Okay, you're basically sitting, observing yourself, feeling the sensations across your body, and trying to not react. And at the same time, first it's like training a little bit the mind to get out of the thoughts. So the first 3-4 days, we're trying to just develop concentration. And it's very hard because we're very mental. And personally, also from what I was telling you, I grew up being very philosophical. So valuing a lot of being in my head and thinking that was the way to be, like thinking about things and processing. And so I was very mental. And it was so hard for me. I remember being there and thinking so much and trying to still my thoughts, and maybe being in that, like, trying to control versus just giving in, relaxing, and getting into the experience. It was hard. And basically what you're doing in the retreat, you're first concentrating, trying to be in that space between your thoughts. And I feel this is a great concept, because there's like one thought arises, then there's a small pause, another thought arises. And when we are very mental, that small pause is a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
It's so short.
Yeah.
Thoughts are coming back to back. And I started discovering that there's this little space between them, and then we're making that space bigger or longer.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, okay, now it's like 5 seconds between thoughts, and like even up to 1 minute between thoughts. And I was like, wow. And I really feel that being able to just sit for 1 minute between thoughts, that's a great progress for anybody that's practicing meditation, just being in that stillness.
Which feels so good, right? Like,
Yes.
it feels so nice to be thoughtless, out of the mind, right?
Yes.
So coming back, it's a silent retreat. You develop concentration, and it's for 10 days, right?
It's for 10 days, and more the goal, well, not the goal really, but part of it is developing equanimity. So it's that not reacting towards, so observing the sensations, pleasant sensation arises or unpleasant sensation arises, and not developing craving for the pleasure or aversion for
Or
the
resistance.
unpleasant.
Yeah.
So staying in the middle, that path of the middle, and the goal for that is to clean our karma. And that's something I didn't understand the first time. Like, I remember it was like very philosophical for me. It's like, how am I really getting rid of my karma through just observing my sensations? That was a challenge when I finished that first training. The first time that I went to this retreat, what was really hard for me to understand was the relationship between how we're getting rid of our karma through equanimity, through observing sensations without reacting. So I felt that very distant. Because for me, really understanding something, I need to go through the experience. And I wasn't experiencing that. I wasn't feeling it. It was very a thought.
Abstract.
And I remember finishing that first retreat and getting that information and just getting a little bit of a question mark of like, what's really the purpose of this? But I did feel very satisfied with how I had gotten into a meditative state for the first time in my life. So as I had mentioned, I had already practiced different types of meditation, that some of them I still practice sometimes, but there's a difference between a meditative practice and getting into a meditative state. And I feel it was the first time on that, maybe not just the last day, the 2 last days of my first retreat, I was feeling in that zone, in that dissolution of my body somehow. Not exactly the complete dissolution, but going into a deeper state of consciousness. So that for me marked something very important, because also I finished this Vipassana retreat, and that allowed me to finally understand deeper the Bhagavad Gita, and then also the Yoga Sutras that I had already started studying a little before that.
So it was like you had all this kind of philosophical understanding, right? Then that experience allowed you to embody and start to understand the wisdom behind.
Yeah, maybe I wouldn't say that I had the philosophical understanding yet. I had the philosophical
Information, right?
And the retreat allowed me to put it into practice and understand it from an experimental point of view.
I had similar experiences with, understanding the philosophical information, something of a cosmovision or philosophy. But then thanks to plant medicines like ayahuasca, being able to understand like, oh, this is what it feels, or like what they talk about, meditation, for example, which is great. I know that also you have a good experience with plant medicines. Like you were saying, you started to experiment with psychedelics for that purpose of self-knowledge, right? You grew up in Peru. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how, because you went very eclectic at the same time, right? Like, so you have the Andean roots of being born in Peru, so there's that available, but also you went into the Eastern philosophies, right? And you felt a deep attraction to that.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Sweden. More than, like, yes, I moved back to Peru when I was 17 years old, but I did grow up in Sweden. And then, so when I was mentioning psychedelics, even though I have a background also in plant medicine, but more it was like when I was 15 years old, I started experimenting with acid. And still, even if it's more of a party drug and we were doing it that way, I still, every time I would do it, I did it with the intention of self-knowledge, which maybe my friends were not doing it that way.
Right.
I was still going to a rave and dancing, but I remember every time I would take this, I would feel like this is helping me get deeper into understanding who I am, what I'm doing here, what life is for somehow. But yes, later when I was 17, I moved back to Peru. And that's when I got introduced directly with the San Pedro plant. Because my name is Pedro because of this plant. Okay, so my parents were very into plant medicine, and I was conceived in San Pedro.
Okay.
So that's the reason why they named me Pedro. My sister was conceived in ayahuasca.
Okay.
So Yeah, so I get to Peru, I'm 70 years old, and my mom, she sends me to live with this curandero. We call them curandero. People call them shamans, or yeah. In Northern Peru, uh, who works and worked with San Pedro. So she sends me there to start experiencing and learning how to work with this plant medicine. And that also takes me into a lot of interesting
Experiences. Yeah, with reason, right? Like that's a whole world.
It's a whole world, and like you're saying, there's a strong relationship between plant medicine and the Vedic and Eastern knowledge and philosophy. Because, for example, the Vedic philosophy, it's born from the Vedas, and the Rig Veda being this first original book of this whole philosophy, its main topic is soma. And soma is it's a plant medicine. So if we don't know the exact what plant, what kind of this was mixed, some people would say it was Amanita muscaria, agaric mushroom. Some people would say that it was something very similar to ayahuasca. Some people would say that it was even like some mixture of weed. So we don't know what it was.
But definitely they were in those states.
But it was something that the Brahmans would take, and it would induce this alternate states of consciousness, where these Brahmans would see their gods. So through taking these plants, they would see the different gods, they would see the chakra system, so understanding their own subtle energetic body. And that's where everything started to expand into the philosophy we know now. And definitely, just like it is with ayahuasca, people before taking this soma had to go through several preparations, like deep meditation, fasting,
Dietas.
different things that they had, like the dietas that we call for ayahuasca. It was very similar. And then, of course, what happened is soma disappeared and the practices remained. And it was like, okay, we can achieve that state without the plant medicine, just through a practice. But of course, through very deep meditation that most people can't really access. Because it's like sitting 14 years, taking a silence mode and meditating for 10, 12 hours every day.
Right.
That's most people were not going to be doing that.
Right.
But definitely there is that relationship with the plant medicine and these personal growth, meditative, spiritual practices that we call today.
Which leads me to the next thing about you, that you have been practicing pranayamas for a long time. And this has been a way also going back to those states that you've been able to get in through Vipassana or through plant medicines, right?
Yeah, so pranayama is something I've been practicing for 30 years. I started 1996.
Amazing, yeah.
So that's a while ago also. And pranayamas, this is something that's so beautiful, how we can explore how we're breathing. And when I was saying before Vipassana, I had practiced different types of meditation. Of course, pranayama is not really, even though some people would call it meditation or it's like a meditative practice, it's different. It's a preparation through breathing to get into the meditative state. And yes, I feel and I know through experience that through working with my breath, I can achieve different states of consciousness and even control how I'm dealing with emotions, which is something very practical. Most people, we have different reactive patterns. And when we learn how to breathe, we can control that.
Everything.
And we can also change our posture through breathing properly. We can open so that the diaphragm starts working better, open in different ways our body, and then the energy is flowing in a harmonic way, in a more balanced way. So definitely for me, pranayamas, breathwork, they call it today, even, so a lot of, there's different scriptures, and some would say there's 8 pranayams. 8 pranayamas. But there's one scripture says these are the 8 ones, and another scripture would say these are the 8 ones, and it's different ones.
Okay.
So of course, a lot of times when we're studying the scriptures, we want to go deeper and see the source and understand the context. And even if some would say there's 8, some would say there's as many as there's people. And I've been learning to practice maybe near 100 different kinds of pranayamas through these 30 years of practice. And they all, what it is more, what I've learned or what I feel from this is that it's more about experimenting. What happens? What happens if I breathe deeper, if I breathe slower, if I breathe through this nostril, if I press this point in my body? What happens if I'm retaining several times? There's so many different things that we can tweak and change in how we're breathing. What happens if I'm exhaling doing this sound versus this other sound? And if I'm trying to get that feeling where that sound is vibrating in my body. So there's so many layers that it's like a game. I've never been like a gamer, but I feel that this pranayama is my game field. It's like I just get into okay, I'm gonna close my eyes, play with my breath, and I'm discovering different things. And in a lot of these nearly 100 pranayams that I work with, some of them I just discovered by accident and thinking like, oh, I just kind of made this up.
But then you
But then I've learned that no, this has a name.
Okay.
This exists. I'm not inventing anything.
Yeah.
I'm just discovering it through my practice.
Let me ask you something. So, right, also the intention of this channel is to make all these practices that sometimes they can sound foreign, very accessible. So, I know that you've been practicing this for a long time, 30 years, but like if we can sum up the essence of the pranayamas, how long they have been existing, for someone who has no idea about them. Because also I would love to also talk about the benefits, because I know that you've been helping a lot of people, with very specific issues, like insomnia, like you said, posture, emotional behaviors. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, if you can sum up the essence of the pranayamas, how old this practice is, and then we can start talking a little bit about the.
Okay. So how old it is, nobody knows. It's
Okay.
thousands of years.
Yeah.
So pranayama is talked about from the oldest texts that we can find. And definitely is as long as we've been breathing, we've been practicing this breath work.
Yeah.
And most people, that's something that's very important, is that our breath is the master of our body and of our mind. And most people don't know this. So this is something we can see very clearly as soon as you experience some, you can call it negative emotion, like anger, sadness, your breath will change immediately. You get angry and you get agitated.
Yeah,
There's something that's happening. Most people are not paying attention. And the next thing that happens is that you stop thinking properly. So we get reactive. We get triggered and reactive. And then once we're reacting in that way, we're not having a proper response. And we're just getting into bad relationships.
Sure.
With other people and with ourselves. And another thing that happens, so the emotion triggers a change in our breathing that triggers us to not think properly and not react, like not respond, but react. And also it affects our body. So our posture changes. We get either like this or like this. We can say, so we can say that we freeze after an inhalation, like somebody that maybe is protective in the aggressive way of like, oh, don't mess with me. Or we can freeze after the exhalation and sink and be more of the victim and just like, oh. And then what happens, that's a reaction that should last for a few seconds or, a couple of minutes. But because people get into the pattern of, okay, reacting like this constantly, our body learns to stay in that posture. And this becomes how different conditions and sicknesses are born. Because then suddenly we are with our shoulders forward, we are compressing our organs, our diaphragm, we're breathing shallow, and this starts getting us into unhealthy ways of living. And just how the breath affects our body, also, if we just change our posture, this will also change how we're breathing,
breathe.
and this will also change how we're reacting emotionally.
Mhm.
So what you're mentioning about that I've helped people that maybe have insomnia or anxiety or digestive issues is exactly that way. So I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner, and in Ayurveda, we try balancing through using opposites. So a lot of people would think sometimes that Ayurveda is the yoga's kitchen. It's about food only. But that's not what it's about. Ayurveda is universal, and it's how we're using all the elements into finding balance. So of course, when I do an assessment, we would have a herbal and eating protocol, but more what I try doing for each person, and I've been doing this for so many people that this has also allowed me to learn and see how these things are working. So I would develop protocol where they have breathing practices, pranayams, together with acupressure points.
Okay.
So when people start using this, then we can see how certain pranayams are excellent for anxiety or for insomnia, okay, or for whichever thing the person is suffering from. Then we can find that balance through a different breathing pattern. And also the pressing certain parts of our body is something that also originally was used in Ayurveda. This is known as the marma points.
Okay.
So the marma points is different. It's similar to acupuncture. It's slightly different, but very similar. So it's through pressing certain points in our body, we're gonna achieve that the energy will flow a certain way
Okay.
and open certain blocks. So allowing that free flow of energy is also gonna bring balance and health to the
Right.
person.
It's amazing how our Western society, we've been isolating things, right? Like you were saying, like one pill for everyone. And what I love about this ancestral system is more holistic, and then you really pay attention to each individual. I know that you've been working on this new project called Press and Breathe. Tell us about it, because it's basically the essence of what you've been doing with pranayamas, but guide us through that program.
Okay, so at first, before guiding through that program, what you're saying about East and West, how
Uh-huh.
Eastern and Western medicines are so different. And I think that the main thing is how modern medicine is basically based on studying dead bodies versus these ancient, being Ayurvedic or traditional Chinese medicine or Taoism, would concentrate on the prana or chi, the life
Left
force.
force.
So it's like, how is the life force? That's what determines if the person is healthy or not. So basing from that point, this life force, prana, chi, is flowing through our energetic, invisible channels in our body. And of course, we're feeding mainly through our breath. Definitely also through eating, from the sun, from sleeping, we're getting this vital energy. But the main source is our nose, how we're breathing. And this is going into our lungs and spreading through these pathways or channels. So also these channels have these bridges. So it's we can say that our physical body and our subtle energetic body are connected, but it's not the same thing. And
Okay.
this subtle energetic body is not something we can touch. It's not something that we can see. But there's these marma points or acupressure points that become the bridge. That's how acupuncture uses needles penetrating the body to reach the subtle body underneath in these specific points that are located in these energetic channels or pathways. So this press and breathe system, I'm integrating something that's been lost. It's not something that I'm making up.
Right.
I'm rescuing something that's been lost. Because nowadays, especially with what we're calling breathwork can be very beautiful. It is very beautiful, but most breathwork schools nowadays, they have all taken their knowledge from pranayamas, but they've cut away most of the pranayamas that it's like, okay, those, they don't serve for our purpose, and they just keeping certain fire breath kind of pranayamas. A lot of times like the mukha bastrika, which is through the mouth. So a lot of breath works, what you're doing is doing the for a long time,
Yeah.
45 minutes, an hour and a half, depending on the system. And this is a pranayama. This is a kind of fire breath through the mouth. But what happens? Ayurveda uses pranayama as a tool for balancing. And for the ones that don't know what Ayurveda is about, Ayurveda would differentiate people through the elements. So something basic is like some people would be more air, some people are more water, some people are more fire, because to say it in a certain way. So if somebody has more air, breathing this way is not going to bring balance, because even though it's a fire breath that's increasing fire, it's also very fast, so it's also increasing air. Similar to somebody that's more fire. Fire breath is not going to bring balance to this person.
Yeah, you say that element.
So yeah, we're increasing the element. Ayurveda wants to use opposite elements to balance.
What do you think why do you think people are doing that? Like the whole breathwork movement, right? Because yeah, you're right. I mean, it's such a trend, right? Wim Hof, I think, was a catalyst, right, for bringing back breathwork. But why do you think they're just cutting and leaving these other pranayamas? Do you think it's because just the way we're living in society, like fast, like we need to stay boost our energy kind of thing, you know?
I don't necessarily have that answer, and I don't think that Wim Hof is the one that brings. We had holotropic breathing and rebirthing for so long.
Yeah, I meant with Wim Hof, it was just like boom, like explosion, right?
Yeah,
like
I like
right?
Wim Hof. I think that he has something to bring. It is a simple practice. It's like, okay, we're doing this kind of breathing.
Yeah.
We're warming up like this. We're getting into the ice bath.
Yeah.
And that works. But at the same time, that's also something that's important to acknowledge, that the ice bath is also not good for everybody.
Yeah.
So for me, always going back to like one step back to the Ayurvedic view, where ice is great for fire, but ice is not good for somebody that's kapha, that's cold already. It's not going to bring that benefit. So we're basically getting something as a one pill fits everyone. And yeah, I don't have the answer to that. Why is this growing so much? Maybe social media, and maybe we just want something that's easy to do and accessible.
Yeah.
And definitely this method of mine, press and breathe, I'm also trying to present it in an easy way, something that everybody can do. But I want to bring that Ayurvedic perspective of like, okay, depending what you're going through in life, there's different practices you can do. I do believe that breath work is positive and it's interesting. I have experienced different kinds of breath work, and I believe that maybe I'm wrong, but that this is a way of trying to bring that idea, that concept of we can experience what you would experience with ayahuasca, for example, through breathing practices.
Right.
And that's how a lot of times they sell it. Because if you're hyperventilating, doing this for 1 hour,
You're definitely gonna feel something different.
you get into an altered state of consciousness. A lot of times the body gets very tight, like a mudra in your hands, and then your experience, there's an emotional release. There is, definitely there is. It is something that's important, it's something that's beautiful. And at the same time, some people might not benefit from this because it might be too much. And it creates anxiety, and it creates confusion. And people get also scared of it.
Push away.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to do that. That's too much. I don't want to go there. This is something that we can go a gentle way too. So that's something that pranayamas have intense breathing like this, and it has slow, soft, more feminine breathing.
Okay.
And that's also a very valid path, how we can get into those states in a gentle way. And I know that the gentle breathing has more benefits to everyone than that strong pumping, which is aggressive, which is violent somehow.
All these different types of breathing, they have their own place, right? And it seems like as a society, whether that was because of social media or the trend, which I find it positive, right? Because people are having more of a, we're all having a better awareness about our breathing, you know. But yeah, definitely there's been more of a use for the fire breath, the more intense ones than gentle ones. So I want to know a little bit more about the gentle ones.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the gentle ones are actually more important than the intense, vigorous ones. For example, when you're breathing slowly, that's when your mind gets calm immediately almost, especially when your exhalations are longer, slower than your inhalations. So this is something that everybody can practice, everybody can observe. So something that for me it's very noticeable that as soon as we start a practice like a meditative practice, and I just tell you, okay, close your eyes and observe your natural breath without changing anything as it is, as soon as you start observing, it starts calming and getting slower. It's almost magical. It's like, oh, you feel it starts calming down. And as soon as you take that rhythm down, your mind gets calm. And that's when we can deal so much better with things like anxiety. We can see how people that suffer from anxiety, they have a very shallow breathing.
Yeah.
So they're not using their full lung capacity. They're not using their diaphragm properly. They have a lot of breaths per minute. So that's something also that's very interesting of timing. How many times I naturally, without trying to change anything, how many times I'm breathing per minute. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And I've had students that they're breathing 17 times in 1 minute versus some that breathe 6 times in 1 minute. There's a huge difference.
Right.
And normally the people that are breathing 6 times per minute are much calmer and centered and take proper decisions in life versus the ones that are breathing shallow, fast, are suffering more from insomnia and anxiety and anger issues.
Everything is faster too.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so the first thing is that there's a paradox. A lot of people think that pranayama means controlling our breath or controlling our energy, but it's more expanding our energy. So ayama is expansion. Yama is control, but ayama is expansion.
Okay.
That it's prana ayama, expansion of life force. So it's not about controlling, but initially we need to learn to control somehow. Okay, there's this paradox because it's like some people do a lot of, for example, the bandhas or the energetic locks, and they're contracting their body, but it's not about that strong contraction. It's more of observing and doing subtle changes in our body. So yes, the basic thing is breathing in and out through our nose. So many people breathe through their mouths. The second thing is the belly breathing. Every time we're inhaling, expanding the belly. Every time we're exhaling, belly goes inward. And the third thing is exhalations longer than inhalations. And this whole thing being as slow as possible, but without strain. Because some people, I'm going to do the slowest that I can, and they do 2 or 3 breaths, and then they're out of breath.
Yeah.
That's difficult.
It's like more stress.
Yes. So it's just getting into the slow pattern without stressing. And that should be our natural day-to-day, minute-to-minute way of breathing. And that's when you get somebody that's balanced and centered and feels good in their body and their life. So practicing that is the first step into developing a knowledge of your breathing patterns versus the fast breathing that's more of a hype. So it's more of like, it feels very masculine. It's very like, oh, competition. It's like, I can do fire breath for 3 hours. And that's how you see these different breathwork practice, like 45 minutes, another one that's 60, another an hour and a half. And it's like, no, we're doing 3 hours. We're the strongest. We can do this. And then people get out of balance. They get some benefits. Some of them get benefits, but some people get out of balance. And it's more important to learn to breathe slower. They say that the slower we breathe, the longer we live.
Makes sense, because it feels like that too. It also puts us into the parasympathetic nervous system, right? We're more regulated.
Yes,
right?
Definitely.
In Present Breathe, how got us through a little bit of what you will find in that program, for example.
Okay. Well, there's different master classes where I'm taking the topic. For example, I have one that's sexual and creative energy.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people don't know how to work with this. Some people are maybe embarrassed even of thinking about sexual energy.
Mm-hmm.
But I know there's so many people that suffer from different sexual conditions and sexual addictions
Mm-hmm.
or imbalances. And if we can learn how to use this energy and converting it into creative energy, because it is already the basis of our creative energy,
Sure.
or even we can say it's the basis of our spiritual energy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this concept, for example, in Taoism and Chinese medicine, where we have our essence, our yin, in this lower chakras, to call them something, cauldrons, these lower energetic centers. And this, we can transmute this, elevate this into the chi,
Mm-hmm.
or the prana, the energetic life force. And we can transmute that into the shen, which is the spiritual energy. And that's why a lot of these people that talk about Tantra, sometimes it's like we want to ejaculate inwards and send it up to our head,
Right.
to our
Get the
brain.
energy circulated.
And a lot of people don't understand what this means, or some people maybe have a concept of what it is. But it's about learning to use, to feel first that energy more than imagining, starting to accumulate and feel that energy and start to pumping it upwards.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different techniques where we can use different breathing, different pranayams to start building up that sexual energy.
Mm-hmm.
And together with certain pressure points, we can start pumping it upwards in a more mechanical way
Mm-hmm.
without having to over control or imagine. It's more of the easing into the practice, feeling what's happening in my body when I'm breathing this way and pressing different points,
Okay.
and starting to get the experience of, oh, when I'm pressing here, there is something changing in my energy. So I have these different blocks where, as I was mentioning, there's also for insomnia,
Mm-hmm.
or there's for digestion and elimination,
Okay.
or for stress and anxiety. So there's different master classes where we're using different breathing techniques together with the acupressure points, because breathwork alone can work, but for most people, we need to activate. We can say that these different acupressure points are like switches in our body that need to
Okay.
be turned on or off for the energy to flow properly.
Okay. So basically, you have created this program for different purposes, right? Through breath,
Yes.
right? Okay. And where can people find this?
Well, I have a website that's pressbreathe.com,
.com.
and that's where you can find the
Yeah,
information.
we'll find it here on the description below. You have Yoga's Energetic Body, which currently is in Spanish, but you're translated into English.
Yeah, the books that I've written are in Spanish so far, and I need to translate them. So I will be translating that one first that you're mentioning, so Yoga's Energetic Body. And this is a study where I'm putting together all the different components of the subtle or energetic body. Most people are familiar with the chakras and the aura.
Right.
But then we have the nadis or the meridians, the energetic pathways. We have the marma points or acupressure points. We have the grantis, which are like the knots where the energy gets stuck.
Okay.
And we have the vayus or the prana, the chi, how it takes different forms in our body, different winds that affect us different ways, and that have certain purposes in our body, in our life. Everything here from burping or sneezing, all these different winds in our body are something that are coming with information for us. They're trying to communicate something to us. And most of us were unfamiliar with how to understand this language. So for me, something that's very important is to learn to understand the energetic language, which is very individual. So the energetic language inside of me is different than yours. And this is a way of me understanding what's happening in my body, hearing what my body is telling me, and that would allow me to make better decisions regarding my health. So this book, Yoga's Energetic Body, is not just theoretical book about this other chakras, because I really, me personally, I never like when I hear a yoga teacher talk about the chakras as something like, this is how it is. We have this one, it's this color, and this is this thing. It feels very shallow, and there's no direct experience about these things. Because most people talk about the chakras, but they've never experienced.
They remain abstract.
Yeah, it's just abstract. So what I'm doing, my purpose with this book is to bring different practices. And these practices, some of them are pranayams, some of them are acupressure points, some of them are yoga postures, kriyas, which are the purification practices that will help and allow people to start experiencing these different components of the energetic body. So that's the purpose. More than leaving it as theory and memorizing what this chakra's name is more of like, oh, I do this practice and now I'm feeling something here. What does this mean? And how can I feel more about this? So that's the purpose of the book, bringing experiences through practices about the energetic body.
Can you guide us, or maybe can leave us maybe with one or two simple pranayamas that we can practice? Maybe it won't take a lot of time.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So there's one that's actually the favorite for most people, because you can feel an effect. Okay, of course, with fire breath we feel an effect as well, and with all these practices we do feel an effect. But there's one that has a deep effect, which is Brahmari, the humming bee breath, and we can do this different ways. So classically, we can either just cover our ears this way or with the thumbs and do different things with our fingers. But I want to bring a different way of practicing where we're pressing the certain marma or acupressure points. What happens with this humming bee breath is that we're humming when we're exhaling, and that humming, you mentioned the parasympathetic nervous system before, the humming is affecting our vagus nerve directly.
Right.
And that allows for deep relaxation. And at the same time, it's helping us produce more nitric oxide in our mouth, which also brings a lot of benefits to our health. So the simply humming brings the benefits on its own, but then if we can combine this with certain acupressure points, then we're gonna enhance our ability, for example, to sleep. Okay, so somebody that is waking up lots of times during the night, or that it has a hard time falling asleep, can use these acupressure points. So the acupressure points that we can use at the same time we're covering one is the yin tang. Yin tang is the center of our eyebrows.
Okay.
So we could be pressing with our thumbs. Our ears is this little cartilage that we're pressing and holding that yin tang. Okay. This is one way of doing things. Another one is the Anmyan point. The Anmyan point translates into peaceful sleep. And this is located from the earlobe on the back. We feel a little groove there. So that's where we can be pressing. Okay. So there's different ways that we can do this, because we can be pressing with the thumb on the Anmyan point and covering our ears. Okay. Or we could be even like pressing the yin tang, pressing on the ear on one side, and the other side closing and getting into the Anmyan in the back. So that way we're getting this also polarity.
Okay.
With one hand we're getting into the yin tang, with the other hand we're getting into the Anmyan, and then we're covering the ears at the same time. Basically, we're inhaling through the nose, we're exhaling through the mouth, humming. And here also is something that you can start just paying attention. There's different purposes to where the tongue is located. So the tongue can be against the upper teeth, against the lower teeth, or in the center.
Okay.
But more, I want people to feel first what feels more natural and for them than trying to do something beyond what feels good in their body. What we don't want to do is that the teeth are together and they start just bouncing against each other. We want the vibration to happen in our lips.
Okay.
And we can vibrate different letters also, and that also has a different effects and purpose, because we can, all the letters of the alphabet we can hum. Okay. But what's and I don't want to talk about all that right now because there's so much information. The most classical is the M, because this is the extension of the Om.
Okay.
It's the Aum. And just that M sound, the mother sound, is gonna bring a deep relaxation into the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system. So let's try doing that we're gonna be covering. We can do thumbs on both sides, or we can do index and thumb, depending what's comfortable.
Okay.
So remember, Anyan point is from the earlobe. There's a groove here, okay? And there's actually a groove further in, which is gallbladder 20, and that's also a great point for sleeping. So it doesn't matter if you don't locate the point exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. You could also use these two fingers, which cover a bigger area. Okay.
Okay.
So, and even this is also known as pranamudra. So it's the gesture of energy. So we can be pressing there with 2 points to cover a larger area, covering the
With the
thumb.
thumb. Okay.
And with the other, also those 2 fingers going into the yin tang and the thumb getting into the ear.
Okay.
So we're going to be closing there. We close our eyes also.
Okay.
So let's try this together. Inhale through your nose. And exhale with a humming the M. We do it 2 more times. It's very relaxing. The lips get like numb, and that vibration where we're covering this tragus, the name of this cartilage, the vibration happens in our head, and that also creates that it is a vibration in our brain that's very relaxing. It induces deep relaxation, and even right now we've done it 3 times,
Right.
and we feel like, oh, I feel good.
It's nice.
Yeah, it's nice.
So like, how many times do you think like?
Okay, so as you can see, 3 times can be enough. And this is something that a lot of people sometimes is like, oh, I don't want to be doing breath work, for example, because I don't have 1 hour and a half.
Right.
Or with pranayams also, ideally, we normally talk about meditating or doing a breathing practice for 1 hour. And it sounds like a lot for most people. Most people don't have time for this.
Right.
So yes, ideally, if you can do this for 1 hour, that's going to be great. But it does have an effect after 1 minute.
Okay.
Okay. So I would say for somebody that's starting between 1 and 3 minutes, it will have an effect even before sleeping. So if you go into bed, you do this for 3 minutes before sleeping, and it does have a profound effect. The acupressure points, 3 minutes, it's a great time for any acupressure point.
Okay.
And we could be keeping breathing like this for longer, but it's not really necessary. Especially if we're being stressed, if we have anxiety, if we're having a hard time sleeping, do this for 3 minutes before sleeping. If you feel that you have time and you have the discipline, do it for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not necessary to do it for much longer than that.
Okay. But if you want, you can stay like a whole hour.
Yes, but at the same time, this is something that's important. How I was mentioning, pranayama is expansion of energy in a lot of people, and this is how breathwork sometimes goes against its principle, which becomes, instead of expanding your energetic, your vital force, you get exhausted. And that's not what we want to do. A lot of times people are like, I'm doing pranayama, I'm going to inhale and hold, and I'm holding for 1 minute and 2 minutes and 3 minutes, and I can hold for 5 minutes. Which, yes, some people that do apnea, this is great, it's great that you can expand how long time you can keep your breath. But if we do this as a constant practice where we're getting exhausted, we're draining our life force.
Okay.
So better to do it for the time that you feel good, not pushing yourself over your limits.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So 1 to 3 minutes to start with.
Yeah, 3 to
good.
10 minutes.
Okay.
That's the best. But even 1 minute, there's
Will
an
do.
effect.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Pedro. That was a really nice conversation. I hope that I get to see you again here in the channel, because there's way more that we can talk about. I also very curious to know more about your experience with plant medicines, your upbringing. So we'll leave that for a next one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, for having me here.
Yeah. And thank you for your time. We'll see you in the next one.